Good morning, one and all, and welcome back to another day here at the news, here at the Damage Report. I'm Iadarola, very lucky to be joined on the program by true internet royalty, the king of Rebel HQ, David Shuster. Welcome back to the program.
I don't even recognize that intro, but I appreciate it just the same. Thanks, John.
Oh, you know who you are and the position.
I know who I am. I don't recognize the royalty, but that's okay. I'm glad to be here. Glad to represent Rebel HQ on the Damage Report. We got a lot to talk about today.
We do, and we are going to talk about it. But just it's been a little bit since we talked. What has been going on at Rebel HQ? What have you been focusing on recently? What can we look forward to?
Well, my favorite video that I've done recently, and it just came out yesterday, was there's this snitch line that was set up by the Attorney General of Missouri to snitch out people who are transgender, and again bombarded with all kinds of gibberish. People sending in transcripts from the movie The Bee, from all kinds of crazy stuff. And so we put a compilation video together where we sort of put in all the different things, even the OxyClean commercial that somebody transcribed to the snitch line. They brought the snitch line down. They're effective, and of course the Attorney General has been humiliated. But it goes to show that there's certain creative and sometimes hilarious action that we can all take to right or wrong. I mean, that snitch line should have never been set up in the first place, but I highly recommend that video on Rebel HQ.
That sounds awesome. I was shocked when the snitch thing did go down, because we did a video on that last week, and we very specifically warned people to not misuse the system, and a bunch of them did. It's unfortunate. It's immature, really, is what it is.
Well, anyway. I like some of the fake names that were, there was a guy who called himself in the name, he identified himself as Ruby Mashlong, and he put in parentheses the Y is silent. So it was just hilarious juvenile stuff. Love it.
Yeah, I think the one that I saw was a gentleman, last name Balls, first name Ligma. So yeah, immature, really. Good job, America. We had a nice little bit of incipient fascism, and you had to stamp it out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And if people want a good laugh, look at the video. We've also got a couple police interaction videos and some Marjorie Taylor Greene videos, which are always fun. So a couple of videos that I do, and then my colleagues at Rebel HQ are churning stuff out as well. So a lot of material there.
It's an army, okay? And an army needs a king. Anyway, with that said, we do have a lot that we're gonna be talking about through the course of today. Not only the massive announcement that's going to rock the presidential primary, but more besides, including some copium from the right wing in the fallout, or in the wake of Tucker Carlson being fired, as well as new details on why exactly it might have come to that. We've got Clarence Thomas looking even worse somehow, Marjorie Greene tangling with Hunter Biden, and Donald Trump's legal woes. We got a little bit of a preview of how in a couple of months they might be getting much worse. And that's just in the first hour of the show. Coming up in the aftermath, we're gonna be talking a little bit about medication abortion, some of the myths, some of the actual facts, the data that's out there, as well as news from around the world. Along the way though, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button and sharing the stream, that'd be great. So the people that we're live, they can jump into the conversation. And if you wanna send us any comments, tweets, or super chats, we'll respond as we go. But with all that said, David, you ready to start the show?
Let's do it.
Okay, it's time for the rise of Dark Brandon. Let's see it.
When I ran for president 4 years ago, I said we're in a battle for the soul of America, and we still are. The question we're facing is whether in the years ahead, we have more freedom or less freedom, more rights or fewer. I know what I want the answer to be, and I think you do too. This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for reelection.
And indeed he is, putting to bed all of the back and forth over the last 2 years about whether Joe Biden would be stepping down after one term in the presidency. No, he's running. He is running to finish the job. He says, it's a 3-minute ad. You can go online and see the full thing. There was a bit of inspiration, a bit of let's get it done, a bit of, as you can see this article, focus on the danger that is posed by Donald Trump and MAGA extremists. There was footage from January 6th, that sort of thing. But it's happening. We're there. Everyone buckle up. We don't know, everyone else who will be running either on the Democratic or the Republican side, but he is. And it wasn't guaranteed. Remember, he originally described himself during the 2020 campaign as a bridge, implying that he's a thing that gets you from one place to another, which doesn't especially make sense as a metaphor if you're gonna hold 2 terms in office, because that's what everybody does. Why are you using a fancy metaphor? at that point. But apparently, according to sources, he is going to run again because of his antipathy for Mr. Trump, which, look, I get it. As well as his belief that he is the Democrat best positioned to keep Trump from regaining the White House. Okay, Trump is very hateable, almost uniquely hateable. And what politician doesn't think that they have the best shot of winning? So I guess that makes sense, but bear in mind that while there's already a lot of jokes about how old Joe Biden is, if he gets elected and if he finishes his second term, he will leave office 86 years old, which is 9 years older than Ronald Reagan was back in the day. And obviously there was a lot of talk about him at that point. So David Shuster, we're there, it's happening. What do you think?
Well, it's not inspiring, but again, this isn't a time when I think a lot of us want inspiring. I mean, look, I want inspiring leaders, but clearly Joe Biden is the safe choice. He's like the doctor with the mantra, do no harm. With Joe Biden, even if he is old, even if he can't think straight, even if he can't speak straight, he's taking a sort of lower profile in his presidency. And I think that's sort of working. And I think the American people have been convinced we'd rather have a lower profile than an extremely high profile controversial figure. So for Joe Biden, there was no doubt to me that he was gonna run. I think his own sort of pride and maybe his own level of narcissism was going to fuel him going as long as his health was there. His health is relatively fine as far as we know. And I think he's figured out, look, I can take the shots. If people want to make fun of my age, if people want to make fun of me fumbling up the stairs, misspeaking, so be it. I feel like I've got the right policies. My issue is that, what about promises he made in the last campaign? Like, I don't know, raising the minimum wage to $15 or another step towards universal health care or trying to bridge the economic divide. I feel like we haven't really made progress, and maybe we should just forget about making progress on that on those things for the next 4 years. It's disappointing, but I suppose it's better than total anarchy and fascism.
Well, you probably summed up quite a few of the political ads that we're gonna see over the next year or so. It is true that obviously it is better than fascism, but it also, I mean, there are other options. We don't exist in a pure, clean binary. But yeah, so look, multiple things can be simultaneously true that might seem to be operating in multiple directions. And we probably, David, shouldn't acknowledge those different things because you're supposed to deliver a clean, easy to digest message of the news. We shouldn't acknowledge that, as you did, he made some very specific promises that he didn't get done. And more importantly than that, because of course, he's not unilaterally in control of everything. What he is in control of is how hard he appears to work to get them done. And for some of them, like the $15 minimum wage, everybody remember his round the country bus tour where he stumped for the need to raise the minimum wage? I don't remember that. I don't remember him really doing anything to raise the minimum wage. So not getting it done would be bad enough, but not seeming to really care that you didn't get it done is worse. And I'm sure everybody watching this can add more things to that list. Including,
well, I described it as uninspiring. Where are you, John? I mean, look, are you one of those people? And I have total respect for people who are like, look, I got to hold my nose for another 4 years. Joe Biden's not my choice. He's not inspiring. I'm not impressed, but it's, I suppose, better than the alternative. Is that where you come down?
Well, look, obviously, so I live in California, so my vote doesn't really matter either way. But that said, I also think that sometimes people in the media will sort of hide behind that. Like it's easy for me, I can vote for whoever the hell I want. I can vote for Grogu or whatever, and we're gonna be just fine. The result is gonna be the same. That said, I go with every election based on what I think the better result for the country and for progressives will be. Which means that I act certain ways in primaries, act certain ways in general election. I want there to be a vigorous primary. I am still hoping that more people will announce. I'm hoping that the DNC will backtrack on what it seems to be a plan to not have any debates. And I ideally hope that he will be beaten by another Democrat. I also am not gonna lie to the audience. I don't think that as of today is very likely to happen. And if Biden and Trump, dear God, and we're gonna talk more about that in a minute, were to go against each other once again, I'm not gonna pretend to the audience that it isn't obvious which of those outcomes is better. It's obvious to me that it is better, although not great, to have Biden. And we can also acknowledge the things that Biden has done in his first term. He did get multiple big pieces of legislation passed, every one of which could have been better, but he did get a lot done. The IRA did pass, he did do some stuff for the climate. There are a variety of things. We briefly had a child tax credit, wasn't that nice? we can acknowledge those things, the good and the bad. If people watching find having to hold both of those things in their mind simultaneously to be distressing, there are people who will lie to you in a more convenient fashion if that's what you would prefer. You will be more comfortable with their rhetorical stroking of your hair and telling you that you're adorable. But anyway, it's gonna be a complex year coming up. It's not the outcome that I would want, and it's not done yet. But before we move on to more stuff about the race and a little bit of fun, and any other thoughts, David?
No, I was just going to say, I mean, on that, I mean, I wish that, Bernie Sanders had not ruled out running, even if Joe Biden announced that he would. I mean, I feel like there's got to be some method, some mechanism for Joe Biden being pushed during the Democratic primaries to say, okay, you couldn't get it done over 4 years, but how, given the divided Senate, the divided House, what do you do to try to tackle things like the income gap or minimum wage? There's got to be some process to get Joe Biden to focus on that. And I'm a little worried that if the Democrats all sit on their hands and nobody runs against them, that we don't really have that discussion. And I think that would be too bad.
Yeah, and he needs to be pushed. And I think he's shown that he can in some ways be pushed, only pushed so far, as we pointed out. There are things that he did not get done as president. And I continually will acknowledge what you just did, that he can want lots of stuff and not get it done. But I also think that like the two hypothetical worlds of the 2020 election being won by Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, in both of those cases, you have Kyrsten Sinema and you have Joe Manchin.
Right.
And maybe the legislative outcome might be similar, but I do not think that that Bernie Sanders, I don't think that he would have taken some of those losses as casually, but I also think that I don't think that Biden is as genuinely bothered by some of the losses. I think that he finds them to be losses to groups that he promised to, rather than deeply held convictions that he's been working towards for decades. They are different men, of course. Really fast, let's acknowledge that although this probably has nothing whatsoever to do with Joe Biden, on his website, they're having a little bit of fun. The 404 page, when you go to like a broken link on his website, has Dark Brandon, so that's a little bit of fun. And you can already buy a Dark Brandon t-shirt. It is unlikely that I will be rocking one of those, except potentially extremely ironically. For now, though, I have not purchased one. So we're gonna have a rematch. It looks like Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. Maybe not, maybe not. Another Republican could beat Donald Trump. He could end up in the slammer. He could choke on a Filet-O-Fish. Joe Biden is already facing primary challengers. You've got Marianne Williamson, who is polling higher at this point than I think a lot of people in the mainstream media would have expected, and technically the Kennedy as well, for what that's worth. So we don't know for sure, and other people could announce. We could have a big contested primary. It doesn't seem incredibly likely. So that said, the single largest likelihood is the rematch of 2020. And what do people think about that? Well, 38% of respondents to a Yahoo News poll said they felt exhaustion over the idea of a rematch. The other emotions that they feel, 29% feel fear, 23% sadness and fear. We have 23% reporting hope, 8% feeling pride. I want to talk to those 8%, and 7% saying gratitude. They feel gratitude to go through the 2020 thing again. By the way, that's general, the having Biden versus Donald Trump. 70% of adults in a recent AP poll, regardless of party affiliation, don't want Trump to seek another term in the White House. And so this is shaping up to be such an American election. Nobody really seems to want it, but we're gonna get it anyway. What do you think?
Well, I think it's going to be reminiscent, in my view, in terms of political science theory. You remember Obama-Romney, right? And usually, and the reason I bring it up is usually when a president runs for re-election, it's a referendum on those first 4 years. How did the president do? How's the economy doing? And what Obama did back in 2012 is he said, no, let's just not make it about me. Let's make my opponent so detestable with the car elevators and everything like that. So it's a choice election, not a referendum on the presidency. That's what you get if it's Biden versus Trump, right? It's not gonna be so much Biden focused on here are my accomplishments. He's gonna run very hard about, well, look at this other guy. Let's make a choice. Let's not make this on how you've done the last 4 years. Take a look at the alternative. And so it changes the dynamics a bit, and it makes it in some ways, Donald Trump he's a very controversial figure for all the reasons that we've said before, but it also changes a little bit of the dynamics in terms of the strategies and the advertisements. And so it's gonna be a bit of an unusual kind of presidential reelection race for an incumbent president. That's, we've seen it before, but it just makes it a little bit different. And to the point about people being tired, yeah, I get it. But I think, again, to my original point, I think people would rather be sort of bored or uninspired or have, a Joe Biden who's incapacitated. I think most Americans would still rather have that than have Donald Trump. And so in terms of the choice, sure, I think this should favor Joe Biden, should favor the Democrats.
Yeah, I think as of right now, that basically to me is how the polling looks. I'm sort of like trying to cast my consciousness forward a year through all of the ads, all of the insane conspiracy theories, like the stuff they're gonna come up with is gonna be something, but also the multiple trials. I mean, we've got the arraignment he's already had. We're gonna have that going forward. He's gonna be facing this rape trial like right now. I think that they're starting this week. We're gonna be talking a little bit about one of his other troubles going forward. So how will all of that, how will eventually something about January 6th, potentially something about the documents, like we have so many news cycles of scandals to wade through. And then I think about the 2020 election. It was incredibly close in terms of the total number of votes needed to swing the necessary states. And I think about how it was that close despite all that Trump had shown us of himself to that point across multiple years of his presidency, the drawing new paths of hurricanes and locking kids up at the border and just all the nonsense. And we were like half a year into his totally willful bungling of the worst public health crisis our country has faced in living memory. And it was still that close. Now, Trump is going to spend the next year reminding everyone of who he is. So there'll be a little bit of that, but I don't know. I can't say that I'm not worried. I think that Trump, as of right now, gives Biden the best chance. I think that someone like DeSantis maybe would have a better shot, but I am a little bit worried. I'm a little bit worried.
No, and I think being worried, I think that's very valid, and I think I think people should be worried because, in my view, I'm putting aside Donald Trump for a second. I think that there's 45% of this country now, and mostly maybe 80-85% of the Republican Party that has absolutely no trust whatsoever in the basic institutions of our government, of our courts, of our politics, of our universities, of academia, of the economy. I mean, all of that. And so when people are that angry and that upset, there's this sort of attitude of, well, let's just burn everything down. That's where Donald Trump comes in, because not only did he, talk about, draining the swamp the last time, but now he would, nuke the swamp, and that's where he's going to go, is just destroy the deep state. And for a lot of people who are just saying, to hell with this society and where we're going, I just want to drop the nuke on our society and see what happens. That's, so I think that's 45% right there. And the question is, well, what about, the middle 10 to 15% of the electorate? What do? Are they frightened enough by Donald Trump and think, okay, Joe Biden's been fine, let's just sort of give him another 4 years? Or is there something dramatic that changes the calculus?
Yeah, and we should also not write off, this, even forgetting the possibility of more legislative action over the next year. Republicans in multiple states have done everything they can to juice the system in their favor, passing laws to disenfranchise voters, taking over county boards of election, taking over some secretaries of state. Maybe all of that will have no effect, but the Republicans have sure fought for it. They seem to think that it's gonna have some effect. And so if it ends up being Biden, my request to Dark Brandon would be, please don't let it be close, because the system is not set up for Democrats to win close elections.
Just in, we can now call the 2024 presidential race for Joe Biden.
My fellow Americans.
This morning, an emboldened China invades Taiwan.
Financial markets are in free fall as 500 regional banks have shuttered their doors.
Border agents were overrun by a surge of 80,000 illegals yesterday evening.
Officials closed the city of San Francisco this morning, citing the escalating crime and fentanyl crisis.
Who's in charge here?
It feels like the train is coming off the tracks.
Okay, so that is the first GOP ad against Joe Biden rolled out, like as he was announcing. What is notable about that is generally when things are really bad, and according to them they are, you run against how bad things are. You don't fantasize about how bad things might be in 4 years. Yeah, anybody can run against something that's not happening. The other is that every image in that ad, we're told, according to Axios, was generated by AI. And there's a lot of fears about what AI voices, video, and images are gonna do to politics. My reaction to this would be, why was it generated by AI? Literally every one of those images already exists. AI exists to produce things that don't already exist. It's a magical technology. Those are just like images of planes and images of Joe Biden with Kamala Harris. He's stood with her before, you morons. Just go on Getty. But anyway, it's a taste of what's to come. They're going to roll out an ad at some point that is literally Joe Biden saying something, but it's not him. So we haven't reached, apocalyptic ad territory yet, but what did you think of the ad that we've got so far?
Well, what's so frightening about this whole society that we're in now is I think there's gonna be, perhaps tens of millions of people who are gonna say, oh yeah, China did invade Taiwan, or yeah, they did close San Francisco. I saw that on TV. I heard the broadcast. People are gonna believe this. And people's ability to distinguish fact from fiction feels like it's been thrown out the window the last several years, and I feel like it's only getting worse.
Yeah, I am a little bit worried about it. Like, we remember in the 2016 election, it was the rise of fake news. So articles that we're not talking about like people who got it wrong or people who exaggerated. We're talking about fake websites made to look like reputable news sources that just make up what they want the news to be. And we know how influential a lot of that was. Did you know that the Pope endorsed Donald Trump in the run up to the 2016 election? Well, I know it didn't happen, but I saw an article about it and it was spread everywhere. We are gonna see so much more of that. And we know that if your grandpa can't tell the difference between CBS and cbs.ru.net, then do you think he's gonna know the difference when it's a video of Kamala Harris saying something about how we need to eliminate white men or something? And it's totally made up, but what do you think they're gonna do? Fact check it? You think your grandpa's gonna be like, well, that can't be real. Let me check Snopes. Let me see if that's actually, it's not gonna happen. Millions and millions of people are gonna believe even more strongly than they do now some of the most deranged stuff we've ever seen in politics, and we're just getting started with that stuff.
And the voice manipulation. I was just fooling around over the weekend with a Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Joe Biden voice manipulator. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, I was able to prank one of my friends pretty effectively. He was like, what? Did Trump really say that?
Wow.
So, I mean, it's out there.
I know, and look at the damage that's already been done with my impression of Trump. It's fairly indistinguishable, and that's without technology being added. So anyway, everyone buckle up. We're gonna have this fight. The ads are gonna be grotesque. That's America for you. Now, I wanna have, before we close out this block, I wanna have just a little bit of fun. Can we just throw to this Ron DeSantis video?
Governor, polls show you falling behind Trump. Any thoughts on that?
Guys, I'm not a candidate, so we'll see if and when that changes.
Look, that's a very brief video, like the whole thing, not even just his response. The question was 10 seconds, and yet, am I the a-hole to say that does not look good for him? You're asked a question, super obvious that a question about the primary is gonna come. Like, yeah, you're not technically running for office, but you're flying around the country doing stump speeches in swing states and meeting with congressmen to get them to endorse you. You're running, okay? Can we not play the game? So they ask you a question about how you're not doing well in the polls and you're being criticized all over the place and on Fox News, and your best response is to pretend that you're a roughly anthropomorphic bobblehead. This is the guy that's going to withstand months of full bore, all cannons blazing attacks from Donald Trump. I just don't, look, some people pushed back like, a year ago when we were saying that he doesn't seem like that strong of a public speaker, that good of a campaigner, possessing of much charisma. But I feel like that's almost become the default position at this point. I think a lot of people are getting clued in that Puddin' Ron is gonna have a rough run. What do you think?
Yeah, and he's cold and prickly. That's his nature. He's not a happy warrior, which can be sort of the magic, the secret sauce in politics. He's the opposite. He's sort of the grim reaper. He could have just said, oh, well, we'll see where things go in a couple of weeks. But he's got this sort of attitude that he's abrasive, and that's just who he is. And the rest of the nation is sort of discovering that, and it's not wearing very well, even on a lot of Republicans.
Yeah, and I feel like the criticism that he's not likable has been going around for a while. What's amazing is that he doesn't really seem to care about that characterization. I haven't seen any indication that they're working on it. Like, he could have played that off and been like, oh yeah, Donald Trump sure does seem to enjoy running against someone who's not running against him yet. We'll see what he thinks if someone jumps in. Like, you could be affable or whatever, or you could continue to be cold but hit back. He landed on the worst of all worlds. That was not charismatic, it wasn't personable, and it came off as defensive and weak. Like if you're a DeSantis fan, and there are still DeSantis fans, I know that you travel all over, you probably talk to a lot of them. That's why I wanted to present this video to you. I don't know what your defense of that is. I don't know what your defense of much of the way that he's been responding to these attacks would be. That pudding ad came out, there was no strong strike back from DeSantis. I expect more of that to come. What do you think? Like what case could be made by a DeSantis stan about what we've seen so far in this race?
Well, I mean, he's good on paper, right? I mean, that's the argument. Oh, Florida governor, he came up through the ranks, he's young, he's handsome, Ivy League educated. On paper, he looks like he should be terrific, but somebody, he better start worrying about his lack of charisma and his sort of coming off as prickly, because in the end, most politics is really about personalities, not so much about policy, and even among Republicans. And when you're going up against perhaps the most, whether you like him or not, Donald Trump is arguably one of the most charismatic politicians of our lifetime. You better at least have a little bit of charisma or something that you can say to sort of say, hey, I can kind of be funny too. If you're going to be this robot who comes across as abrasive and cold all the time, it's just he doesn't have a prayer. And at some point, he's got to have somebody around him who's willing to tell him that, or else it's going to be a very short primary season.
Yeah, is he like, I know people have been trying to come up with like historic parallels. Is he Scott Walker? Is he like like a MAGA revamped Jeb Bush? Like, I mean, Jeb Bush was kind of like coasting on the name, but he was a semi-popular figure. Like, do you see a historic parallel for what Ron DeSantis might be facing right now?
I think it's being maybe too gracious to Ron DeSantis to say Jeb Bush, because Jeb Bush could sort of be likable at times, and Scott Walker could sort of be kind of soft-spoken at times. Ron DeSantis seems like he is wound so tight. He's like that kid who knows everything, and I'm gonna force it down your throat. And he's got to like hold himself back, and all you have to do is sort of jab him, and he's gonna explode. Well, that has to change. He's got to figure out a way to sort of take the shots and sort of have some fun with it, or else he's toast.
Yeah, and don't jab him, don't make him explode. There'll be pudding everywhere.
Tucker Carlson was sitting here 2 weeks ago interviewing you. He's gone. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm shocked. I'm surprised. He's a very good person, a very good man, and very talented, as you know, and he had very high ratings. So we're just learning about it almost as we speak. You and I just said, wow, that was something, that's a big one. I don't know if it was voluntary or was it was somebody fired, but I think Tucker's been terrific. He's been, especially over the last year or so, he's been terrific to me.
So that is from yesterday. And look, it was close to the news coming out, but I love him like tripping over himself, pretending that like, we don't know, was it involuntary, or did Tucker just abruptly leave without a final show and all that just for funsies? No, he was fired. We now know this, but Trump there weirdly going out of his way to like be shocked and appalled that the guy who thinks of him as a demonic force, a destroyer who he hates passionately, was doing a hell of a job. He also bleated the fact that Tucker Carlson would no longer be on Fox News is a big blow to cable news, capitalized, and to America. Tucker was insightful, interesting, and ratings gold. He will be greatly missed. Well, he was ratings gold. I think interesting is fair, okay? Insightful, maybe, in what he revealed about media and about the right-wing audience. Greatly missed, probably. I've seen a lot of messages online of people who do miss him. Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted cable news is about to be taught a powerful lesson after Fox News caved to the woke mob and fired Tucker Carlson. Is that what they did? I don't think that's what they did. Americans no longer blindly watch the news like they did decades ago. They only watch the ones who have courage to tell the truth. Americans are about to quit watching. That might be true, but I also love her pretending that we haven't gotten a crash course in how much Tucker Carlson willingly lies to his audience over the past few months. But that was her. We've got Glenn Beck saying, I think that this will kill Fox. Lauren Boebert says, wherever Tucker Carlson goes, America will follow. And so they're in cope mode. But David, unlike those people, unlike me, you actually have had experience with him. So I imagine you were even more shocked when the news broke.
Well, I wasn't shocked per se that eventually Tucker met his fate and they had to leave Fox News, because I think Rupert Murdoch really wanted to, at 92 years old, change directions. And this was sort of a convenient time to get rid of Tucker Carlson and maybe use that lawsuit from Abby Grossberg against him. What strikes me though is, and to everybody who doesn't know my background, I worked with Tucker Carlson at MSNBC. We had been friends before that. He had spent some time in Little Rock just before I spent some time in Little Rock in the 1990s. We always had that, and I always liked him. I substituted on our shows. We had our disagreements politically, journalistically, and he, a couple, maybe 6-7 years ago, suggested to me when I saw him in Cleveland, he says, "Oh, maybe I can grease the wheels for you to go back to Fox News," and I burst out laughing. Like, no, that's okay. But that's the kind of guy Tucker was to me. He was willing to sort of be helpful. But along the way, I always knew that Tucker was so bitter and so angry about the way he had been humiliated at CNN with Jon Stewart and fired, and the way he had been humiliated by MSNBC when he got fired in 2008. And so in my mind, Tucker was like, okay, I'm gonna throw out all the old rules. If I get another chance, and he got one at Fox, I'm gonna throw out all the journalism, and I'm just gonna do whatever I can to promote Tucker Carlson, to push the envelope, to get as powerful and get as many views as possible. And so he found that formula, and he's a bright guy, and he's a good broadcaster, and he kept being able to sort of push it and farther and farther. But in the end, it was sort of his own undoing, because apparently what happened at the end was that he said some things that were found out in the discovery of this Dominion lawsuit in which he was disparaging his bosses. And that's one thing that Rupert Murdoch doesn't like. If Tucker Carlson came across as more powerful than Rupert Murdoch, then he had to go. And so I can only imagine, for people who hate Tucker Carlson, you're gonna be satisfied to hear that I think this is crucially, I think this is brutal to Tucker. I think his ego is taking a huge hit by him being fired. He doesn't really care so much about the money. He just wants the power and the prestige, and he doesn't have that now. He may have that in streaming, but I imagine he's probably taking this pretty hard.
Yeah, probably. This is to the TD. I don't know how much we can zoom in, because I'm about to play the tiniest violin that has ever been played on the news live before. No, Tucker! He's feeling bad. He's feeling down. He's feeling a tiny fraction of the pain and suffering he has caused so many people over so many years. And when he finally gets past how bad he's feeling, he will go back to being another rich a-hole who can do whatever he wants and will always fail upward. But anyway,
well, and look, that gets to, to all of us who were once friends with Tucker, that gets, we didn't recognize the person that Tucker had become. And for a lot of people who used to like Tucker personally, it was, it was so frustrating to all of us that how could this guy, with all of his talent, with all of his smarts, I don't think Tucker believed most of the crap that he was spewing on the air the last several years, but somehow he was able to do it. And what sort of strange person, what do you have to become in order to continually lie to your audience, to know that you're lying, to know that you're manipulating them? How do you do that night after night? What's wrong with you to make you think, well, this is what I have to do to play the game? That's sick. It's a sickness for sure, and his audience got played.
Yeah, and look, I think he's one of the worst examples of a thing that very much exists. He maybe moved kind of, not even the farthest, but like succeeded the most in this pursuit of right-wing approval and right-wing money, but he's not the only one. We've seen other people who have wildly changed their positions in pursuit of right-wing viewers and money. It's a thing, okay? It doesn't help America. It does seem to help their bottom line. That's why so many people do it so vigorously. That said, I want to turn to something that you were alluding to there. One day out from Tucker Carlson being fired from Fox, we are getting a little bit more clarification about either why he was fired, or at the very least, why high-placed sources in Fox want us to think that he was fired. So we kind of have to wade through this, but we do know that apparently there was a Friday night conversation between Fox Corp CEO Lachlan Murdoch and Suzanne Scott, the CEO of Fox News. They apparently decided then to do it and waited a few days to actually tell him. Mr. Carlson, he had last had his contract renewed in 2021, will apparently be paid out for the rest of his contract. He makes about $20 million a year. So he's going to be paid lots and lots of money without having to do what passes for work there. He apparently was only given about 10 minutes notice that he'd been fired before they announced it. So that's probably not gonna feel good to him. But we also do know a little bit more about the argument for why this happened. So some are saying that the fact that he so often and so enthusiastically used the most disgustingly misogynistic language to talk about people in the news, people like Sidney Powell, we found that out in the Dominion lawsuit, just the culture of his studio was that talk like that, racist, wildly misogynistic, anti-Semitic, was just normalized. Also, he, as David alluded to, was highly critical of the execs at Fox. Basically, if they were looking for an excuse to fire him, it was made available. Alternatively, if you take the story that they're saying, they are now taking this sort of misogynistic work environment a little bit more seriously. They have fired people in the past as a result of that. They would have us believe that that is why they fired him. That it wasn't anything about the sort of messages he'd been pushing, but it was about the fact that he was potentially opening them up to massive liability, which we might learn more about with Abby Grossberg's lawsuit. I'm curious which, if any of these, you think are the true explanation.
Well, the other part about it is if they're paying him out the $20 million, there's probably an expectation in his contract that he will not work anywhere else for the balance of his contract, 2 years or 3 years. If Tucker Carlson really doesn't care about money, and apparently he is independently wealthy because he's the heiress to the fish fortune, whatever it is, then he could say, to hell with your money, I'm gonna go start my own podcast or do what Joe Rogan does or join Newsmax or whatever. So Tucker, I mean, he's got some options here, but I do think that for Fox, I mean, to me, it says more about sort of Rupert Murdoch that even Rupert Murdoch has some sort of standard. Even Rupert Murdoch at the end of his life, after all the damage that Fox has caused America and democracy the last 20 years, Rupert Murdoch looking back in his life says, okay, I don't want to go out as having poisoned democracy to this extent. I got to do something different. Okay, well, it's 20 years too late. I wish Rupert Murdoch had changed directions 20 years ago, but it's something.
Yeah, it's something. I wish that the universe worked in a way where, I don't know, bad people get what's coming to them a bit more. In my experience, that isn't often how things work out. But in my view, and obviously I don't have the long-standing, personal relationship that you did. He was terrible. He was one of the worst people, I think, in American political media history in terms of his willingness to lie to his audience, to do great damage to the country. And I don't know. I don't even know that this is karma, because as you say, there are multiple roads forward where this makes him more free, more powerful. But at least it's something. It implies that, it's like with Trump and the lawsuits. I just want to believe, even briefly, that consequences exist, that bad behavior sometimes is punished. We so rarely have any reason to believe that. I don't know, maybe the idea that he really did seem to believe, and it was revealed in those Dominion texts, he thought he was bigger than Trump. He thought he was bigger than Fox News. And the fact that he thought that he was bigger than Trump didn't seem to hurt him. Trump did not turn on him. But he did seem to believe that he was bigger than the Murdochs and bigger than Fox News, and I can't imagine that they liked that. I mean, we can recall, I'm curious on your thoughts on this about his path going forward. Bill O'Reilly was huge. He got fired, and now he still technically has a show, but how does that matter? Glenn Beck was really big, and then he got fired, and now he still technically has a show, but how much does he matter? Is your read that Tucker is sufficiently bigger than they were when he was fired, that if he wants to reestablish himself independent of Fox, that he'll be able to do it? Or do you think that we might see that same sort of pattern reassert itself?
I think it's gonna be the same pattern as sort of the Megyn Kelly, the Bill O'Reilly. I mean, the options are, okay, does he become the next Joe Rogan, who perhaps one of the most influential, podcasters there is? Or is he sort of smaller scale, Glenn Beck, Bill O'Reilly, Megyn Kelly? And I see it sort of in the latter. I don't think Tucker Carlson does the Joe Rogan thing. But the one thing that I think another piece of this, though, is he has paved the way by telling Republicans that Donald Trump's indictment, this is your loyalty oath now. You have to defend Donald Trump. You have to be with Donald Trump to fight back against the New York indictment. He has essentially paved the way for Donald Trump's nomination in a way that no Republican media figure possibly could. So maybe moving forward, if Tucker Carlson wants to continue to be, ride that wave of Donald Trump, I suppose there's a lane for him doing that. Republicans should probably thank their lucky stars that Tucker Carlson is gone, and maybe there's a chance now that without such a Donald Trump cheerleader on Fox News, maybe the Republican primary becomes more competitive, but I'm not sure.
We've got another devastating update on the Clarence Thomas, Harlan Crow debacle. Do you remember when ProPublica came out with their major reporting? And there were lots of bombshells about the gifts and the trips and all of that. But even they pointed out that one of the things that makes it a little bit harder to say it's definitely a conflict of interest, this relationship between the Supreme Court justice and a right-wing mega donor, is that Crow and his firm have not had a case before the Supreme Court since Thomas joined it. That's what they said. Yeah, about that, turns out kind of did. So Justice Clarence Thomas apparently did not recuse himself from a 2004 appeals case, even though the company being sued was part of the real estate empire run by Harlan Crow, the GOP mega donor who of course showered him with, historic busts and Bibles and things like that. So this is at odds with Thomas's past statement about potential conflicts of interest. He said at the time that he'd sought guidance from colleagues and others in the judiciary early in his tenure as a Supreme Court justice. He said he was, quote, advised that this sort of personal hospitality from close personal friends who did not have business before the court was not reportable. Yeah, they had business before the court, so you're lying. Like, remember, it's one thing to believe that before the business and then change your mind. He's reflecting back on 2 decades plus of this relationship and mischaracterizing what that relationship actually was and how consequential it might have been. Basically, the court case had to do with this $25 million copyright claim brought against the Harlan Crow residential company firm. And that was part of the Crow's father's real estate business. The Supreme Court's decision in the end ultimately benefited Harlan Crow residential. That is, again, and this is the most shocking part of all of these updates, not against any ethical guidelines because we don't have any ethical guidelines for the Supreme Court. They can basically do, at least up until that point, whatever they want. And I don't know, David, that this is gonna be enough to move the needle. We've been waiting to see if there's gonna be any kind of investigation or anything like that. But it seems like every week it just gets even worse, even more explicit. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it does. And a lot of people had lack of faith in the Supreme Court and the court system anyway, and now it just it echoes and bounces around even more. There's been this argument about, well, the problem is that Clarence Thomas is not reporting these gifts. And my argument is it's not about reporting. They shouldn't be getting gifts. None of the Supreme Court justices should be getting lavish trips or millions of dollars to give speeches or hospitality. None of them should. And until we can say that's where our goal is to cut out all conflicts of interest, all apparent conflicts of interest. It's not enough just to disclose things. There has to be an even more ambitious step. And until we can get there, Supreme Court, and until the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts stops punting and actually says, yeah, let's have this discussion. He doesn't even want to have this discussion. He just wants to say, take it up with the judicial conference. Really?
Yeah, it's maddening. Like, this is great extra additional reporting. It's great that we have these facts. It draws the link of a conflict of interest even more explicitly, but we don't need this, man. This is so obvious to regular people. I mean, as a hypothetical, in the room with me right now is Edwin. Edwin is awesome. Show couldn't work without Edwin. If I found out that Edwin was getting gifts from Harlan Crow, I wouldn't even know how that could be a conflict of interest. I wouldn't know what he could be doing to the stage setup or my camera shot or the lighting, but I would find it to be suspicious. You should really go and talk to your lawyer, Edwin. The idea that a Supreme Court justice, I don't need any hard evidence of a conflict of interest, it existing at all, is so damning. And as bad as this is, I still would rate the housing thing with his mom as even worse. I mean, this feels, I'm not a Supreme Court scholar or anything, this feels like one of the dirtiest relationships that has been unveiled. And it's just amazing that we haven't had any movement on it.
Yeah, not only a dirty relationship, never mind the relationship, but there's Clarence Thomas now thumbing his nose at everybody else, saying, not only am I gonna have this dirty relationship, screw you about whether I'm even gonna report it. I don't need to report it. I'm above any sort of ethical constraints. I can do whatever I want. I'm Clarence Thomas. Well, you know what? When Americans hear that, when they see that, regardless of their political views, and I even have some conservative friends who are really uncomfortable. They love what Clarence Thomas has done in the court. They cannot stand the idea that he has become sort of symptomatic of the lack of ethics, and it's a problem for them too. And when you have across the political spectrum, people, you get them away from the cameras, you get them off the record, and everybody would say, yeah, this isn't a good thing. We don't want everybody across this country to lose faith in our court system. That's terrible.
I'm very glad that you said that, because I find it interesting that some people who are principled enough that it does actually bother them. Really fast, maybe they haven't made this clear. Do they want him to step down, or would they think if he was to step down or be impeached, would they find that to be acceptable, do you think?
They would find it acceptable if they could find another Clarence Thomas to replace him on the court. It's all about political gamesmanship. Sure, they get rid of Clarence Thomas, but replace him with somebody else who doesn't have the ethical baggage, but has the same right-wing conservative, constitutional views. So their means justify the ends. I mean, great, but that's how sad we've become, right? I mean, you can't just say no. Forget about who's the president and who might be able to pick a Supreme Court justice. Can't we agree that this Supreme Court justice should be off the court? And right now we're in such a hyper-partisan era that even people who might agree that no, what he did was wrong, we're like, well, who's going to be his replacement before they actually give you in?
Okay, let's move to even more outlandish grounds. This is a feud I did not expect we'd be talking about. Hunter Biden's lawyers are now requesting that official action be taken against Representative Marjorie Greene because of what they are saying are statements that demonstrate violations of the House Ethics Code and standards of official conduct. First of all, I find it to be hilarious that they believe that there are any standards of conduct that apply to Marjorie Greene. For the most part, it has been revealed that that is not the case, but they are pressing forward. So they cite a Truth Social post by Greene in January, in which she posted photos of Hunter Biden driving his niece and her cousin. This is already disgusting that she would be posting this, and accused him of being on crack and wheeling and dealing with China and prostitutes. She considers negotiations with China and prostitutes to be similar sorts of things. He's just wheeling and dealing all around. They say in their letter, Representative Greene's unethical conduct arises from her continuous verbal attacks, defamatory statements, publication of personal photos and data, and promotion of conspiracy theories about and against Robert Hunter Biden. None of these could possibly be deemed to be part of any legitimate legislative activity. She is, of course, not cowed by these legal threats. If anything, she wants you to believe she's emboldened, tweeting, Hunter is upset over my statements. Well, Hunter, the entire country is pissed off about your obvious influence peddling with your daddy's political power. Come chat with us Republicans on the Oversight Committee. We have a lot of questions. Well, not questions, just conspiracy theories shouted at you as loud as I can before I'm asked to be silenced by other people of the caucus. But she is pushing forward. I find this to be interesting. I don't know whether the things that she's said qualify technically as defamation. I know some people are raising that question about her recent comment on one of her podcasts that transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney is one of the biggest pedophiles in America, which seems slanderous. But anyway, David, I'm curious what you think about this.
I don't know if this is intentional or not on part of Hunter Biden and the Biden family, but I think it is very smart politics for Democrats to make Marjorie Taylor Greene the face, the focus of the Republican Party. And to the extent that Democrats can say, look at who the GOP has become and continue to harp on Marjorie Taylor Greene at every opportunity, that's wise. And so we're already starting to see some Republicans, when Marjorie Taylor Greene was shrieking and accusing the Homeland Security Secretary of being a liar, and then she finally got silenced. There's some Republicans who are like, okay, she's gone too far. We don't want so much attention on her that's hurting us as a brand. Democrats can see the blood in the water. And I think if they see Republicans starting to get nervous about Marjorie Taylor Greene and all the attention she's getting, they're gonna pour it on. And I think it's wise for Democrats. And it'll be interesting to see how the Republicans respond.
Yeah, I was actually pretty shocked that they pushed back to the extent that they did. I mean, she must be, I can only imagine how embarrassing it must be to be a serious Republican and to have her be the one that's drawing all of the attention. I think it'd be a very interesting debate to try to figure out what the nature of the scandal that eventually brings her down will be. Whatever it is, it'll be disgusting and embarrassing. But anyway, I'm not gonna read this entire thing. If we can put up this second statement of hers, she talks about how they're looking into other Biden family members and how the lawyers might pick them up as clients. Our list of Bidens just keeps getting longer. Reminder, she is the one who for the past weeks has been telling us that any criminal investigation of Donald Trump whatsoever is illegitimate. Meanwhile, she's looking for Hunter Biden's second cousin twice removed or whatever to try to bring down Joe Biden with. Okay, good luck, good luck. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the first hour of the show, but don't worry everyone, there's a lot more where that came from, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Iadarola. I'll see you soon.